Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Just the Facts, written by LordsOfJoop. The place was a grisly misuse of space and money before the ravages of crime were involved. Spires of pure, uncut excessive money as a virtue painted the scene in bright, garish colors. Neon-tinted blasts of light shone through the perforated grille that used to be an armored window that covered enough to conceal a respectable housing development. A half-dozen primary-colored body bags lay in what might be construed as neat, orderly lines, artificially introduced to the moment by dint of the earliest of the crime scene ghouls, prepping it for the next round of thinkers and future drinkers. One of them, the detective with 18 years behind his badge and 11 behind a serious bottle, surveyed the casualty list and gave a low, almost appreciative whistle. His partner, a newcomer to the murder resolution business, arched her upper eyebrows with concern before voicing hers. "Something about this is amusing to you?" she asked, and he simply shook his head, doing a quick head count on the uniforms milling around in the semi-productive modes. After snapping his fingers twice in succession, the heads turned to him and he began to speak. "Thanks for coming out," he said. "We're all good here, it seems. Walk the rope, photo anyone who takes too involved of an interest, and turn in your notes to the watch commander when you head back to the house. Again, thank you for your help, officers. They're in our hands now." He gave a half smile as he received the usual and expected half waves, half dead-eyed stares from the departing uniformed officers. Soon enough, leaving just the technicians and his partner in their wake. She once more spoke to him. "This amuses you?" she asked, and he shook his head. "No, not particularly. This is just the start of something terrible. Seen the names of these folks yet?" To this, she shook her head. "I got this call about 6 minutes before you got here, so I got just a few details. Walk-in, possible robbery. Then it went sideways, followed by an 8-way shootout and doors that spilled onto the balcony." She then gestured to the upper tier of the establishment, a full 5 stories above them, still with blinking lights from the broken barrier's illumination strip shorting out every few seconds, spitting sparks that died on their way to the ground, landing as ash dust. "Observant, detective, just not for the right part of the details," he offered, his tone warm and kind. "Fight didn't happen until someone stopped their exit. Then it got nasty in a hurry. This is a worker, that's for sure. We'll probably find a body in the bathroom, likely upstairs. And their head will be a lot misshapen," he snorted softly. "Then someone in a closet strangled with a zip tie or choked out with a section of wiring. They didn't bring many tools and improvised." She held her hand to his bicep, squeezing it firmly. "Wait a minute," she said, shaking her head. "How do you know all of this? And how could I be that far off the mark? My observation skills, they're in the upper 96th percentile. You don't even take those assessments." To this, he simply pulled his arm free of her grip, shaking his head. "You don't need them, I don't. Math doesn't solve a case. Instinct, skill, and a strong knowledge base. You get that from guessing wrong a lot. Anyone who says different should be smacked until they agree." He smirked, then motioned to her to follow him inside the scene itself. As they entered the living rooms, bodies became obvious, 2 perched in chairs facing each other, a table broken in half between them, a scattering of gun fragments in all directions around them, laying next to a spilled food delivery box and warming sleeve. "First impressions, detective?" She stopped, examining the scenes. The shooter came in, took a pop to both of them. One of them hit the table, the other shooter destroyed the gun before, leaving this room to go upstairs? He shook his head. "Shooter came in, probably dressed as a food delivery driver, then crossed the room before either of them got their gun into position, although after they'd drawn their sidearms." He then mimed a motion, moving to stand over the bodies, cracked one in the head with the other's gun, then shot the second man's gun in his hand, which caused it to shatter. After that, they then switched to the next floor. He then looked straight up to the landing of the stairs adjacent to himself. The other detective, making notes, walked the same path, mimed the same action, then walked behind him and his way to the next floor. A body lay on top of the stairs with a chunk of masonry in his head, his jaw malformed by a sharp, sudden impact, and a ring of mottled bruising around his throat. "Killer took out this guy with snap kick to the neck and then hit him with a brick?" He shook his head. Killer grabbed him by the throat, slammed his head into the ceiling, then cracked his spine before he dropped him to the floor. We can check, and he'll have shattered hyoid bone, dislocated jaw, and then at least one popped vertebra. Suffice to say, this guy dying was a priority. Didn't even get a chance to draw his gun. The holstered weapon under his left arm, still sheathed, told a tale of horror if he had managed to clear the leather enclosure. Killer then walks to. The detective shook his head. Ran! I don't think the stride depths you'll draw from those footprints are indicative of someone who's walked anywhere in this place. All of this happened in high speed. Correction. Killer then ran to the office, taking out 2 more of the bodyguards. The pair of bodies in the doorway, their bulky masses almost blocking it, had wide-eyed stares that only corpses can muster and demand and maintain indefinitely. Walk me through how they died. She then knelt next to them, examining them closely. Puncture wounds approximately an inch wide at the base of the jaw, she said. On each of their throats. Looks like a quick, brutal stab. The bruising says it wasn't sharp, just a fast-moving object. Unfamiliar with the weapon type, though. She then looked to him, shrugging in confusion. He then nudged her to the standing position, using his index finger, angling her to look up and away briefly. Then he pressed his index finger into the same position. Fingertip. That kind of strength and focus. It's not incidental. That's someone with a very specific goal in mind. Could have used a gun, brought a knife, whatever. Still chose to use their bare hands. Visualized how angry that person is at any given moment. She paused, shaking her head, shuddering briefly. Then they went into the office and butchered the man behind the desk. The detective nodded sagely. Not even going to look, and I'll tell you it was brutal as it was thorough. Snapped bones, probably at least one organ literally ripped out of their body. Enucleated eye, there's a laundry list of atrocities. She leaned in, scowling for a moment. Yes, probably. Both of them. And I'm thinking that we should look for anyone who worked as a mortician for a suspect. That, or there's a doctor with surgical skills operating without anesthetic. A new cause of concern, that. The detective then gestured to the balcony. We have 3 more floors of this place to go, and I'll tell you now. This is a guy who was their target of interest. Everyone else was just in the way on the route outside, really. If they had any sense, they'd have hidden, waited for it to be over, and then called us. To this, he shrugged and continued. 5 more murder scenes with 11 more bodies, and still, the carnage was as speed-oriented as it was horrific. 2 bodies found in proximity were killed with the same method, while the triple play of them were each killed with different means. A section of metal piping from the art display, a railing from a nearby staircase, a single glove shoved into a windpipe hard enough that tore the fabric of their trachea, in addition to tearing the trachea itself. As they progressed, she became more and more ill at ease, looking queasy. A veteran of full score of homicide investigations, reduced to a boot recruit, green and tender. He kept her company, guiding her conclusions to the accurate landings, until they were at the top of the structure, looking down at the still gathered masses of cruisers parked outside of the building's lobby doors. The other police looking up at them and squinting eyes and baffled expressions. So the killer is on the roof, he asked, then gestured to the absence of bodies. What happened next, detective? She leaned on the railing, shaking her head. The killer, she began, moves like a track star, crosses a room in under a breath's time, punches like a cargo hauler, and then does it again and again, for a total of 26 kills, not counting the bathroom suicide. To this, he nodded. Even then, I think that the killer forced that girl to shoot herself with the pistol. No wounds to her, just some old dope scars. Doesn't seem like the sort to top herself off, really. To this, the detective then asked the question again. What happened next, detective? She squinted, rubbing the bridge of her nose, shaking her head. Honestly, she said, I think that he just jumped off the building and ran away because she looked to him with an almost accusatory expression, which rapidly shifted to surprise. Wait, she said, you think that too, don't you? To that, he nodded softly. Yes, I do, he said, because the killer could survive the fall. I've seen it happen before, detective. He smiled, then looked out to the horizon, a faraway cityscape blinking and shining in the dark hues of the evening. She walked to the railing by him, gripping it tightly. This is where you say something improbable and show me that you've been having a laugh at my expense, she said, her tone irritated. He shook his head. No, he said. My second year on homicide, I was there for the Session Massacre. 46 dead, no wounded, all by a single killer. A myth in the murder desk community. They never caught the killer, and believe that they have long since left this world. He smiled faintly. That, I believe more than most. He then looked over his shoulder, conspiratorially, then to her. She leaned in, nodding softly. Do you think that they're done by the same person? He shook his head. No, thank the gods, no, he said, chuckling. I'd wager that we can run the connections of everyone with a room temperature in this place and find a long list of priors, most likely drugs or some kind of vice. The guy in the office definitely had a boss vibe to him. Seeing him get vaporized, I'd bet strongly that our narcotics team can spell his middle name without checking his ID card. He smirked, then looked over the railing. 31 meters, he said, from here to the ground, enough to shatter your legs, spine, half your ribs, and then your forehead when you faceplant into the pavement. And I can nearly promise that the killer walked away without a scratch. Skin like tanned leather, eyes that seemed in the bandwidths to each side of ours, hearing like an animal's, and nerves jacked up by nature, so tight they can catch an arrow barehanded. He nodded softly. And we'll never, ever catch them. Because nobody wants to, Detective. We keep these stories circulating, and we never, ever catch them. She furrowed her eyebrow, shaking her head. Aren't we in the business of solving murders? He nodded. We did solve it, he said politely. What we didn't do was capture the killer, because we shouldn't. For the next, 5 or 6 months, crime is going to drop to nearly nil. Do you know that? He tisked softly. After the Session Massacre, it was a physical impossibility to score narcotics in the capital for almost 2 straight years. He gestured to the aforementioned city center. Now you can't yet run into an addict in every walkway in downtown. He sighed, smiling. It's not a bad arrangement, although you'll never prove it exists. She paused, about to speak, then stared into the middle distance. Sacrifices. He nodded to her one-word commentary. Yes, every few years there's some spectacle or another, and crime drops. It's not a perfect system, and it wears off after a while, of course. The people get brave, jaded, stupid, all three, really. He shrugged. We put on a show, write it off as unsolvable, hand out awards to make a big show of it, and the world continues to spin until the next time the altar needs some blood on it. He smiled softly. We drop hints and ideas. Sooner or later, one of them will come and do the job. We don't pay. They do it for their own reasons. Traffickers in drugs, slaves, guns. It's all the same to them. She frowned. What are they? He looked up, then gestured softly. Angry. She looked back to the ground. How long do you think we have until we need them again? He looked to the skies again and had no answer. Who are they? Humans. Despite what you've been told, they're real. They're visiting our world frequently, and more than anything, they want us to be safe. The skies remained as silent, a witness as ever, and continued to shine in the darkness. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.